So I said, hey, how about including ayahuasca? This is also healing. This is also part of the psychedelic renaissance. I think that has been kind of my main contribution to this entire field. I mean, of course, not only one single person does everything, but definitely that's something I can raise this flag. That has been a lobby and advocacy of mine to bring these discussions into psychedelic science and talk about psychedelic science is not just biomedicine, not just health, not just white American celebrities, but there were also other voices and other forms of knowledge and other ways of healing and other traditions that merit examination and dialogue.
All right, Bia, this is a conversation that I've wanted to have for a very long time. We have a number of mutual friends, so I have to thank Sean Carr for the introduction. Welcome to the Smarter Not Harder podcast.
Hi, thank you. Appreciate the invite. It's nice to be here.
So, Bia, the first thing I would love to dive into with you is what got you interested in psychedelics at such a young age, and you know the work that you've done. What really drove that interest?
I'm not sure about so young. I think there's a lot of people that start experimenting with substances much younger, like 15 or something. I had the chance to eat mushrooms when I was around 19, 20. I was starting to study social sciences in the University of São Paulo, and had a big road trip that I visited different communities and tried different substances, and later on tried ayahuasca. And it has been very influential, very mind-opening and heart-touching and spiritually awakening, and just really feel a bigger understanding about nature and life and the mystery of existence and the challenges of not knowing what is death and what's ahead. And so have been very comforting for me existentially and very inspiring in terms of the cultures related. I've always been a lover of cultures, languages, and different traditions, and that's why I decided to study anthropology. So these two interests have always gone hand in hand for me.
I actually don't know if there was one defining moment where you said like, hey, you know, this is what I want to focus the rest of my life on, or have it be my life's work with regards to psychedelics, ayahuasca, or, you know, sort of seeding that moment where you knew that this is what you wanted to be your focus?
No, it was more like I was hijacked or something. When I saw I was completely involved in so many levels, and I kind of, was dragged into it. It was very organic. Like I just go to a ceremony and start asking, where is this music coming from? Oh, that person, he knows more about that. So go talk to that person. And then that person say, well, if you really want to know, you should come to my house. And then you go to their house and say, well, that person, I got a good story. Let's go and meet da da da. And then just go one thing after the other, and then you see a movie and somebody tells you about a documentary, and then you meet the person who did the documentary, and he had a lot of stories, and then he had questions, and then he had comments. And so at an early age I kind of become already a reference, because there wasn't so many people studying this in Brazil. And so my books, they attracted a lot of people, and I started to put together events. And when we organize events, it was like putting this, little piece of cheese in the middle of of the room, and finding all this, different creatures coming from all over, smelling that piece of cheese and wanting to gather around it, because there were not a lot of spaces to talk about this kind of thing. And then just people with different interests, like all kinds of interests. A mother that is lost because her son is bipolar and hasn't found any healing, or some remote ethnobotanist, kind of gardener that is interested in getting a seed of this plant that he read about, and somebody that is like doing a media documentary and whose dream is to document different styles of music across the Amazon. It's just like I became a kind of lost and found or central observatory of ayahuasca related topics. And I am still, I get
Yeah.
about, I'd say at least one message per day with some kind of question. And sorry to say I don't answer all of them, but I try. I try to answer. I try to help. We also have like a frequently asked questions button, and we create resources. If you analyze both my inbox from my website and from Chacruna, it gives you a map of the needs of people. So those needs made me who I am. And it was like more like this came to me, then I decided, oh my god, I want to be this since I was age 5, and this is my goal. It's a very needy area. There's a hole, there's a lack, there's a gap. And it's like if you're interested in gardening or whatever, basketball or reading or weaving, you can find a club, you go to the library, you find somewhere to express their interest. But when it comes to sacred plants or psychedelics, there's different ways to call it, plant medicines. There's not a lot of institutional things at place. So
Yeah.
I organically became a reference and became that sort of knowledge, and by extension created a whole work. And Chacruna is an extension of this that started
Mm.
as an early age.
Very cool. So at what point did initially it sounds like this all started in Brazil, right? And your studies, and then at what point did you decide like I need to be in the United States, or was there another organic push into that US, and if so, what was that push?
Well, that was like my whole life history, because I was originally tried mushrooms and peyote and LSD when I was backpacking in Mexico, and later on tried ayahuasca in the south of Minas Gerais, and then went to the Amazon, to the Brazilian Amazon, and later to Peru. So since ayahuasca since 1996, I went to Peru in 1997, beginning of 1998, and continued going to the Amazon every year, sometimes a few times a year. And my main collaboration contribution to the conversation has been always publishing books. So I have published on drug policy, plant medicines, ceremony, ritual religion, indigenous shamanism, social justice, issues related to gender and race in psychedelics. And by organizing books and conferences, I became that kind of expert. And that led me to be invited to organize conferences, give lectures, support media projects, and then got different jobs. So I lived in Germany and worked in the Institute of Medical Psychology in the University of Heidelberg. Then I worked in CIESAS and CIDE, both in Aguascalientes and Guadalajara, and the other order around. CIDES in Aguascalientes, CIESAS in Guadalajara, working as an anthropologist, and later moved to California. That was in 2017, around Psychedelic Science 2017. So basically, I guess the less glorious and more accurate way to say was I was a researcher jumping from contract to contract, from job to job. There's not a lot of jobs for an
Yeah.
anthropologist. It's mainly academic career. So I got different university appointments, and I stayed a few years in each one of them. They are all really nice universities. And then in 2010, I attended MAP Psychedelic Science Conference. I actually proposed to MAPS to create an ayahuasca track because there wasn't. They had a clinical trials track and an interdisciplinary one, which basically they stuck everything else that existed that they couldn't classify as clinical. And so
Hmm.
I said, hey, how about including ayahuasca? This is also healing. This is also part of the psychedelic renaissance. I think that has been kind of my main contribution to this entire field. Uh, I mean, of course, not only one single person does everything, but definitely that's something I can raise this flag. That has been a lobby and advocacy of mine to bring these discussions into psychedelic science and talk about psychedelic science is not just biomedicine, not just health practitioners, not just white male cis biomedical researchers, not just white American celebrities, but there were also other voices and other forms of knowledge and other ways of healing and other traditions that merit examination and dialogue. And so lobbied for the creation of an ayahuasca track, and they kind of let us keep like this basement without a wall, a window, like kind of, okay, go do your hippie thing somewhere down there. But it was very popular, and we created like a kind of association, organic listserv of ayahuasca researchers around that meeting, which exists until today. It's a 15-year-old listserv. And at that time, I met Clancy Kavner, who later on became my wife. So Clancy and I met in Psychedelic Science 2010. We're like
Wow.
a conference couple.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's why when they talk about going to conferences and all that, I'm like, keep an eye open. Although there's a lot of policies about how to behave in public these days, but it's definitely somewhere that you can find kindred people, and starts all. I'm a fan of conferences. You can start all kinds of relationships and partnerships, business, romantic, existential, spiritual. It's a place that a lot happens. It's a kind of condensation of time and space. Anyway, Clancy and I dated long distance, 7 years, from 2010 until 2017, while I was in Germany and then in Mexico.
Wow.
And then we married and I moved here. And I've been here for since 2017, so 8 years. So ultimately, what brought me to the United States was Clancy and my collaboration with MAPS and working as a volunteer for many years. Met Rick Doblin like 2007 in the DPA conference and was a volunteer for MAPS for almost 10 years, and then worked on the main tracks of MAPS conferences to 2010, 13, 15, 19,
Wow.
23, 25.
Wow. There's so much there, but as you're telling the story and this history, I'm seeing a lot of the seeds of Chacruna there. At what point did you decide, like, hey, we need to start Chacruna? And, because I want to kind of take this conversation into Chacruna. What led you to starting that? Because, obviously MAPS had existed. And just would love to give some context around timing and sort of what made you say, okay, this is absolutely needed in this space right now.
Again, perhaps I have to do some workshops about storytelling to make my narrative more like impressive. But yeah, it's just, my style and like kind of straightforward and
No, I love the straightforward conversation. The conversations I have with you have always been straightforward, and I really appreciate that. So, just like, what was the seed moment that said, okay, we're starting this now?
again, it was a little bit of a continuation of everything. It was, in many ways, it's like, I had all this, I was some sort of octopus with multiple hands and branches doing a lot of things, just a lot of connections. So I had been publishing books, compulsively, uh, hyperactive in the book publishing
I have
business.
a few of them stacked to the side of me over here. So,
Yeah, it's been I've published so far 28 books, three special journal editions, two translations, and I'm currently working on three books. So just working on books and conferences, that has been kind of my main focus, and doing research, giving lectures. I was already doing all of that always, but the difference is before I had a job and I was in the university and I did these things, some of them on the side or as activism. I always was a blogger. I started a blog in 2004. I had my activist side, and academia always felt like a little bit constraining. I felt repressed. I felt I couldn't like be myself, crack enough jokes, talk about my personal experiences, just fly and just have fun. Felt always a little bit in a cage. And then when I moved to the US, I was looking for jobs and trying to figure out what would be next for me. And yeah, I guess you could say that there was an aha moment when I decided I wasn't going to get a job, which is a kind of risky moment, very risky. Fortunately, I have the support of Clancy, but I just decided that I didn't want to try to be an academic professor full time. I've never lost my link to academia, and I've had different appointments as like an adjunct faculty through different things. CIIS, I taught 6 years. I was a visiting scholar in Europa. I am one visiting scholar now in the GTU in Berkeley, Graduate Theological Union. But I kind of decided I was going to invest in having my full autonomy. So very much cherished just doing, establishing my agenda of research and activism in my own terms. That's what inspired the creation of Chacruna, is to be able to fully develop my vision. And then as I moved here and witnessed the psychedelic renaissance in the United States, felt progressively shocked and bothered by the lack of inclusion of indigenous voices, of people of color, of women, of queer, of immigrants, of all the so-called minorities or global majorities, if you will, and just this hegemony of biomedicine and reductionism of science as the only way and equal to universal truth. And then the problem of funding and the disproportionate amounts of money that exists, the differences north and south, and then the waste of money that exists in the United States. Like you go to a conference and you see like one, extraordinary party. It's the salary of a whole family in Brazil for a whole year.
mm-hmm.
And then the way that the donors and elite funders operate, just like replicating the same colonial logics, felt really, really troubling to me. And these paradoxes that are inherent to philanthropy. And that kind of inspired me a lot to create our philanthropic program and to rewrite the way this philanthropy is done, putting service at the center, putting really the people that you want to support at the center. And so a lot has been a reaction to seeing, like the way we were treated by donors. We don't want to be that kind of donor. We want to, we call it our Indigenous reciprocity program, decolonizing philanthropy, because it's not the job of the people on the ground to show to you that they are what they do matter and that they are relevant or that what they do is important, and like it's your job to support them, and they are the experts and they are the people with their hands dirty on the ground and they know what the solutions are. It's not like the white savior mentality that you go to a third world country trying to create solutions for them and
Yeah.
tell them what to do, or make people like create decks and seduction and competition among themselves to get a few pennies from people with more money. But rather, it's on you to do this homework to see who you're going to support and if you vouch for them or not. So we created our program. I'd say, Chacruna was born as a blog. Chacruna was born as a blog to publish academic research in more accessible matters.
Hmm.
So shorter articles, sexy, flashy titles, and less bibliographic references, less footnotes, less quotations, more like straightforward, more less jargon, less hermetic, more appealing to a larger audience, yet still by experts, still with academic rigor, still by people that are really involved in research. So we started as a blog publishing. We had a blog in Spanish, Drogas, Política y Cultura, that we were already doing that with articles from another conference I organized in Mexico back in the day. And then we created this blog in English, and it started as a blog, and that was like late 2016. And around mid 2017, I had arrived here for psychedelic science like in February, let's say July. A few months later, I decided, well, I'm going to invest in this and I'm going to try to do this para academic work. Chacruna is a lot like a school, like a university, like the cultural extension of a university, like the sorts of departments within the university that tends to the community. So get the experts to talk to the general public in a more accessible way, a kind of mix between academia, media, and community. And so from there on, we created the extension because it was called Chacruna. Then it became Chacruna Institute for Psychedelic Plant Medicines. And then we created our programs throughout the years.
Yeah. Uh, I want to go through a few of those programs with you, and you mentioned something already, and I want to just go a little bit deeper on it, on the idea of indigenous reciprocity. And I realize that, as a white male, I'm probably part of the issue here, but I want to highlight just sort of some of the things that you've said. Uh, the current, I guess, when people maybe listening to this think of ayahuasca ceremonies, they might fly down to the jungle, pay some service, an extraordinary amount of money, to go sit ceremony somewhere. Can we highlight just some of the issues with that? Because I had the pleasure of attending the Chacruna conference this year, right? And meeting some of the elders that you brought in. And there's a lot of emphasis on, either how little these people receive out of those ceremonies or how it's not really giving back to the community. And you've been very vocal on this, right? Like, how do we give back to the community? Would love to go a little bit deeper on how Chacruna does that and make sure that, these communities get the credit and really the highlights that they deserve.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you went to our conference. It's a real strong effort to put together. The Chacruna conferences are produced by us. We do not outsource it. It's like a whole team of people working for 1 year. It's really crazy and hard to believe we do it every year. But it's highly fulfilling. As you saw, it has a lot of magic and a lot of intention and purpose around the conference. It's very unique. So the Indigenous Reciprocity is a program of grants of the Chacruna Institute. We started with 20 and then we reduced to 17, I think 14 or 15, and now we're currently at 12. We have in different countries. In Latin America, we just have one here in the US. And The criteria to join our program is that it is groups that are indigenous led or mainly indigenous led. It can be a partnership, but you can like see that there's like strong indigenous component to it. And there are small that are not, already beneficiary of a lot of philanthropic dollars from the global north, um, and that are collective. So it's not just a family or an individual doing their own thing, but a group of people, and that has a track record of actions and a clear established, you know, accomplishment. Some of them have been small, like don't even have a bank account or bylaws or some kind of institutional support. Uh, and they have to have a minimal structure. Like if there's somebody in the middle of nowhere without a cell phone or email, it's going to be hard. So it's kind of that size and that element. And then we give grants. We normally disperse it like 4 times a year, and it's kind of a seed money, a small amount, 3 4 thousand, but it helps. And the ideology around it is that they don't have to like convince us, and we ask a report that is not overwhelming, basically like 2 paragraphs, and do not micromanage and support different causes. It's not just the psychedelic fetish, like I only care for you because I like your psychedelic, but we have different projects, land demarcation support, food sovereignty, education, music, language, different topics. Women, we have a women's cooperative, and we have like WhatsApp group with each one of them, and we communicate organically. And they share their accomplishments. We shared on Instagram. We also have lend a hand on things like creating websites, creating logos, doing a promotional video. We try to lend our expertise. This program is led by Dr. Osiris Garcia Cerqueda. He is Mazatec, and he's a historian and sociologist, extremely intelligent and very humble and grounded, really nice guy. And we have 2 interns that support him. And we have a whole team of people. We have our own website, and we have our Instagram account. And so a lot of the work is also just raising awareness around these topics, raising awareness that, there are traditions and populations that have been using this before the psychedelic, so-called psychedelic renaissance, or the counterculture or the hippie movement, or the white scientists in the Ivy League universities. And in many ways, these traditions go independent of what exists here. I mean, of course, there is a dialogue and stuff, but their legitimacy, their worth is not because science shows that it's worth. It has a legitimacy in its own terms. And so we kind of helping rewrite the narrative that the psychedelic field tells itself, centering these voices at the forefront, because these voices have been normally not have a seat on the table. And so we have been promoting intercultural dialogues, between scientists and indigenous people, and between different areas of knowledge. A lot of what we do is like we're in the market of knowledge, so to speak. We go to a lot of conferences, we give a lot of lectures, we also publish books, and we have our online social media stuff that is also a form of spreading knowledge. And different forms like with courses, workshops. And there's such a hunger. It's really touching.
Yeah.
Especially like young people, we get a lot of invitations all the time to go teaching classes. It's wonderful, really. The only challenge is to keep everything sustainable, because it's hard to prove to the powers to be that education matters. Education is something that everybody says, oh, education, education. It's like a cliche, everybody agrees. They're never going to meet somebody that say, I don't care for education. I think we
Mm,
shouldn't have education. Like, that's the kind of thing that is completely common sense. But it's hard to put the money where your mouth is when it comes to education, because it's just like a lot of donors, they want something more flashy, and they want something that they can say, I did that.
yeah.
And so it's hard to say, I helped a conference, I helped a workshop, I helped a course, I helped a publication, I helped a book. It's not so tangible. I had these discussions with donors, like, how much does an idea cost? Because you're working on a level that is not something that you can just put your fingers on it. A lot of nonprofits are like issues on mental health or children or animals. They are also prevalent and important, but it's not what we do. As I
Mm,
say, we're a kind of para-academic organization that is in dialogue with communities and researchers. So we're kind of very unique, and it's been hard to keep it going, but it's continues to grow and to survive and to thrive step
yeah.
by step.
Where in that dialogue, you mentioned sort of the white scientist in the Ivy League, but also, corporations come to mind too, especially recently when people are starting to get into this field for more um, like capitalist bents, if you will. Where do you think we are in that conversation of even corporations acknowledging indigenous reciprocity, and what work really needs to be done? Because it sounds like there's people out there that are patenting everything or trying to patent everything, but they're not acknowledging a lot of where this history comes from. Where are we in those conversations? Do you find the corporations even open to them?
I mean, I think all is a matter of optics, right? Because is the glass half full or half empty? I think we've come a long way. If I think of my early years, the first conference I organized in 1997 in Brazil, it was called the Ritual Use of Ayahuasca, which became my first book, The Ritual Use of Ayahuasca. We're celebrating 25 years of the publication of this book. The conference was 1997. That book is 2000, the year 2000, so 25 years ago. It's an entirely different scenario. Also, like, indigenous people have become much more proeminent, and are taking their own voice and doing their own conferences and doing their own advocacy. Back in the day, to bring indigenous people to psychedelic conferences, it was really hard to even prove that was necessary. So now, it's kind of obvious, and I don't think any conference wants to create, a conference that doesn't have any indigenous people. There's indigenous people in the opening and closing, and there's different spaces for indigenous people. So it's come a long way. In many regards, it has entered, and there is an awareness that didn't exist. There's also a new generation of indigenous leaders themselves and speakers going to these conferences that didn't used to exist as well. Uh, so I think there's been a lot of progress, and yet at the same time, it continues to be like minimized and belittled and kind of, considered sort of cute or like decoration, sort of, and not taking it extremely serious, like considering the science, indigenous knowledge as legitimate as science, like to take that knowledge seriously, and to think that they are on equal levels. Like, all you talk about, like, indigenous medicine is ethnomedicine, but we don't talk about Western medicine as ethnomedicine. Like, if we were only putting this different forms of knowledge with the same epistemological value. So I think there is a lot to go. And then there's also the problem of tokenization. A lot of corporations that pretend to care and don't care, and might even have an indigenous person employed, but actually the decisions are not indigenous led, and are led by a group of donors, white wealthy donors, and there's the problem of this I like. I published this special journal edition with my friend Dr. Monica Williams, who has influenced me a lot, and I like a lot. And one of the funny things that I like that she says is like, when you see institutions trying to look for diversity, they try to diversify everybody that is like employee, but it's very hard to diversify the leadership. Like the leadership doesn't stand down and say, I'm going to put some person of color here to change the balance. So you still see a lot of minority, less strength and less numbers and less decision making power in research teams, leading nonprofit organizations, leading corporations, leading big grant research projects, being research participants, is still very uneven. I think George Floyd raised, the whole during COVID in the United States, and what happened around George Floyd really put the racial issues at the forefront. But this doesn't mean that, there's equal levels of child mortality, life expectancy, wealth, between different races in the United States is still highly, highly. I mean, we're still living under all the systems of oppression,
Mhm.
legacies of colonization, legacies of patriarchy, of systemic racism, of oppression, of capitalism. And of course, we talk a lot about race, but, we still have a huge class problem.
Mhm.
And I think this is a way that normally white people understand better the topic of diversity. If you talk about either women or poor Americans, maybe get some white people less, rattled up than if you talk about race or gender. That is
Mhm.
very sensitive as well. Um, so there's still the levels of inequality are really high. And just recently, I met a veteran and we had a 3-hour lunch, and he was very touched by Chacruna. And I said, but why? We don't really work with veterans. That's not our thing. Although we have had a lot of programming around veterans. And he said to me, I feel you're the only organization that really cares for people like me. He's a Black disabled veteran that lived with PTSD, and poor,
Yeah.
and says that still a lot of the organizations in the space, I'm not saying we are that, I'm sharing a story that touched me, that honored
Yeah.
me. I have a lot of respect for a lot of organizations, including vet ones. But yeah, still I feel a lot of organizations are kind of mainstream,
Yeah.
and are not putting these minorities at the forefront. So Chacrunas has helped. We talked a little bit about Indigenous reciprocity, and the other program that we have, we call Psychedelic Justice, which is really inserting discussions on race and gender in the field of psychedelics and elevating these voices, Black, Indigenous, women, people of color, queer people. We have done all this work around the topic of queer in psychedelics with 2 conferences and 1 book. We have helped also bring to the forefront queer voices since our conferences and publications. Again, we're not the only ones, but we did play a pioneering role. And today there's every conference, every gathering has a space for queer folks and queer panels. There's an explosion of queer people on podcasts, on webinars, talking about how psychedelics helped to heal them, and the challenges of mental health, of poor self-esteem, internalized homophobia, of distorted body image, uh, lack of connection to the family, to community, self-hate, and how psychedelics have been helping, and what are the specific needs, but also gifts and possibilities that queer people might bring as healers as well. So there's a whole discussion around that. All of that for us, is under the banner of what we call psychedelic justice, elevating these minorities, bringing discussions on gender and race, and promoting critical thinking. And we've
Yeah.
been kind of ahead of the curve trying to, pin what's there, what needs to emerge in the culture, and what's kind of not said and not spoken. So, been talking. I gave my first lecture about sexual abuse in 2010. Um, this became a huge topic later on. We're talking, making conferences in Mexico about the issue of conservation of peyote, much before it was this big issue with decriminalization of nature, this movement, and the fights with the Native American church, because parts of the psychedelic movement were refusing to follow their request to leave peyote out of regulation and leave it for the Native Americans to deal with. And so Chacruna has been promoting those critical conversations and critical thinking, and also was, I think, one of the first to talk about the topic of corporations itself. Like, we had this conference, Cultural and Political Perspectives on Psychedelic Science,
Mm.
in 2018 in CIIS. And there was a panel talking about the commodification, the corporification of psychedelics. And that became a huge topic at the time. We only had maps, and it was kind of the beginning of discussions around a tie and compass.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of critique about mainstreaming psychedelics. That's still a topic, this mainstreaming. And so that's, definitely, we have been talking about this commodification on multiple levels: the commodification of ayahuasca retreats,
Yeah.
the commodification of psychedelic conferences, the commodification of psychedelic therapies. Um, Sorry, I kind of
No, no,
go.
no. I want to let's carry on that thought of commodification. Um, you published a book on Chacruna published a book on RIFRA, right? And would love to kind of get your concerns with the spread of psychedelic churches, right? Or do you have concerns, or do you think that's broadly a good thing? What are the positives and negatives of more and more of these churches coming into existence?
I mean, again, extremely complex questions, $1 million questions. We try to, in a way, to be very objective in Chacruna, like, we can have our cool cappuccino, $10 cappuccino, watching the Bay here in San Francisco, talking about existential issues. But there is, at this moment, like, gallons and gallons being cooked, brewed of ayahuasca to be exported all over the world. And so we try to have a pragmatic approach, a harm reduction approach, a raising awareness approach, a public education approach, and we try to make a contribution to make this expansion more balanced. And so the psychedelic churches, I mean, it's really like, I can say, well, I don't think, or I think, like, it doesn't matter what I think. People are going to do what they're going to do. So I'm going to try to influence what's happening, which is exactly the principle of harm reduction. It's saying, you know, should people be doing, like, overdosing, or should teenagers have sex? No, maybe not. But, they're doing it. So let's use condoms. So let's use clean syringes. So let's try to figure out how we can manage this expansion to be less harmful and more empowered, more self-aware. So the whole issue around these churches is both to raise awareness of people about their religious rights, but with religious rights come obligations. So you have obligations to follow as well. We try to raise awareness around topics such as the conservation of plant medicines, the tokenization of indigenous knowledge and indigenous shamans, the need to have well, the topic of best practices and preparation, integration, proper screening, proper training. But much beyond that, a lot of other things that can be done. If you're creating a group, are you registered as a nonprofit? Do you have a leadership? Do you have mechanisms to report critical feedback? Do you have a leadership that is open to listening? Do you have mechanisms to keep accountability in check? Do you have, systems where people can resolve conflicts? Are you paying taxes? Are you paying fair wages to people? Do you keep track record of your sacrament? Do you properly screen? So we have. This is related to the third program. So we talked about Indigenous reciprocity and psychedelic justice, and talking about the program we call Protection of Sacred Plants and Cultural Traditions. And one of these programs, a big part of this has been to help psychedelic churches self-organize and empower the community, empower the people in the ground to both organize and keep each other accountable. Because the idea is that you have a law that is like created by experts or government or authorities, and then you put that down, top down on people, is less effective than you have community organizations on the ground organizing bottom up. So values, ethos, sensitivities that people share in a group setting because they learn, they are socialized. There's an etiquette, there's a ethos, there's a style, a way of doing things that people value as the proper way of doing things. And so that knowledge, the traditions, the informal, the social, the cultural means of controls there's an expertise, there's a knowledge, there's a tradition, there's a container. Those kinds of things that need to be better organized and shared and spread. And so helping people develop those things and create mechanisms for themselves, and then potentially create containers that are safer, because it will be safer for you to attend a community like that than perhaps an itinerant shaman that is doing sexual abuse in this town, and he gets caught. He just goes to the next town and nobody knows him, and he's just going around to different places. So having a group and having systems of peer review between the members of that community. And then there's also all the legal dimensions of it. Like, do you have a religious doctrine? Do you have some kind of belief in, explanations about the origin of life and humanity and so forth, like these foundational issues that are characteristic of religions? Or we have also helped people create and systematize those that thoughts. It's a kind of paradox, because religious freedom is perhaps one of the most enshrined values on the American Constitution. Mm-hmm. And it's something that a lot of people can relate to. Yet there's not a real definition of religion, and religion has been defined by courts on different cases. So by looking at what different court cases ruled, you can kind of have a base of what a religion would be. And so this kind of checklist, also looking at the rules of the IRS itself, this kind of checklist, you can sort of go through it. And we have helped what we call the creation of legal harm reduction. So what are the mechanisms you can put in place to protect your religious rights in case you were, for example, caught or busted by authorities? You can claim you were exercising religious practice if you're following the standards of a religion. So all of these kinds of things that I was mentioning before. Who is transporting? Is this kept in a safe place? Is there a track record of quantities? And again, it's a double sword, because it's not just your rights, it's your obligations.
Mm-hmm. Well, Bia, this has been a fascinating conversation. We've covered a lot of what Chacruna is involved in, but before we wrap up, I just want to give the floor. Is there any other sort of initiatives that you're pushing forward lately, or maybe pushing forward very soon, that you wanted to highlight that Chacruna or yourself are involved in?
Yeah, thank you so much for giving so much time and attention to Chacruna and to me. I invite everybody to come to our conference, Psychedelic Culture, which will be 17 to 19, 2026, here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, in the Brava Theater in the Mission. And next year, we're also going to continue our certificate on ceremony, ethics, and reciprocity, which we have done this year as a pilot project, and it's going really well. People are taking a lot out of it, and we plan to continue. We're planning to launch a program, a training for religious professionals, which is, we have gotten a grant for that, and we're developing a partnership with a Christian psychedelic society called Ligari. And so we're going to launch this program next year. It's going to be a kind of 101 for religious professionals. And we're working on a few books. As I said, we have one on indigenous practices, and we have one on psychedelic assisted therapies from a humanities perspective. We're also going to be relaunching a few books in Portuguese on the celebration of the 25 years of my inaugural book, The Ritual Use of Ayahuasca, and we continue to do our work with the Indigenous reciprocity, always trying to fundraise for that initiative. We have a few ideas on how we would like to continue that program, but we really need more funding to make it happen. We just launched a new website. I think we have more, but I forget. It's grown a lot. We've been
You have
doing so
so
much.
much going on, Bia. This is I feel like we can have a separate podcast on like how you keep it all together, because there's a lot going on with Chacruna and yourself for sure.
Well, it's a mighty organization. We have a big team in Latin America. I forgot to say we have Chacruna Latin America as well, which we do events in Portuguese and Spanish. So in Mexico and Brazil, a big part of our team is in Mexico, and a big part is in Brazil, and another part is in the US, and we have some in Europe as well. And so we have a website in Spanish and Portuguese, and that's also kind of a way for us to give back to, to where we come from, and also to the traditions that originate a lot of these practices. And so we're very grassroots. We have also an internship program. We have currently more than 10 interns. And it's been, frankly, a love fest. We get along super well with the interns. They come with a lot of energy, with a lot of love. And we have a membership program that we have about 500 members, that we also have like a Discord channel and a group of some meetings for members. We have our fiscal sponsorship program, where we have helped incubate and launch organizations. We incubated and launched the Sacred Plant Alliance, that now has its own 501c3 status. We have, I think, 2 or 3 active different organizations. So there is room for people to participate. We're trying to create some kind of volunteer program that we would like to launch. So we have room for a lot of different ways to participate, and we have 4 websites: the Indigenous Reciprocity, Chacruna Latin America, Chacruna in English, and Psychedelic Culture. And we also have a social media for each one of them. So it's a universe. We unite a lot of people that are guided by a passion, because for a lot of us, sacred plants have really influenced and changed our lives for the better. And so it's an honor to serve this cause. It has been so deeply touching and influential, and I keep like getting reenchanted all over again I was just recently doing a diet in the Amazon for 2 weeks. Just felt so much gratitude, and I was isolated, thinking a lot, about life, and just felt so lucky to be able to have this life and to do what I do. And it's kind of a school, and it's spreading and has a lot of young people. And people also join Chacruna, stay for a few years, and then they go somewhere else and continue to develop. And we continue to have this kind of alumni relationship to a lot of people that are now leaders in the space and become colleagues and continue to be in relationship with us. We have partnerships with over 70 organizations. It's a lot of years for me, and it's
Mm.
been a real intense journey. To conclude, you asked about the corporification of the field. I feel that the fact that MDMA was rejected by the FDA was really painful for a lot of people, especially veterans who were looking a lot forward,
Yeah.
and a lot of people that are suffering a lot. Um, and it was a kind of moment of crossroads for me with what do I really think about all of this. And I think the field diminished and shrunk, and it's incredibly painful to see the lack of funding.
Yeah.
But I would also say that a lot of opportunists jumped out. There were also a few rats that jumped the ship. And it does feel a little cleaner
Yeah.
uh, that, people, a lot of things that weren't really in alignment collapsed. Of course, I'm not going to be like celebrating, collapse of people, because we have to like focus on our own contribution. But I think we have a good moment now, a little bit more of sobriety, to play with words. We have a chance to move forward in a more balanced way, and we have a chance to include different voices, and also just keep, not extend the pendulum to the other side, not go to the messianism and to the
Yeah.
guru kind and to the savior mentality, or to that kind of cheesy spirituality. That's the new beginning of everything, and I am the messiahs, and now it's a new era, and now everything, like, just more balance all around, and more dialogue. Really, we all need each other. And I think it's like we really have to like talk to different people and be able to create bridges and dialogues. So I'm very confident in the years to come. I hope that I get in my lifetime to see more of this flourishing of this field that I help co-create and build. And I hope that Chacruna achieves a level of sustainability. It's my dream. It's my American immigrant dream as well. And yeah, thank you so much.
Bia, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on the podcast today and sharing all of this wealth of knowledge that you've helped build. We'll, of course, link to everything in our show notes. And thank you again for taking the time today.
Thank you. Big hug, everybody. Have a great day.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.